We're exploring the idea of conflict today, and I have to say, this is one of those topics that as soon as we even say the word conflict, sometimes people sort of shrink into their seats a little bit. It can be a difficult concept to talk about. I'm here with Amy Megan Fisher, who is our sales and client relations specialist at DLCC. Amy, how often do you get calls from clients about conflicts?
Pretty much all the time. Most calls are about some sort of conflict. We have managers that call because maybe one of their employees comes across as confrontational and that's causing conflict. Or sometimes we have managers that want to encourage some of their leaders to speak up and share their opinion more, and that they're not jumping into the conflict enough, if you were. So yeah, conflict every single phone call,
Yeah.
basically.
And really we look at conflicts that every team deals with conflicts and how they deal with it. Amy, I love the, so two examples you gave. In some teams, it's too much. We're not doing it well. And in other teams, there's not enough of it, or it shows up in ways that is not necessarily ideal. And so we really recognize that every team deals with conflict. In fact, the highest performing teams have a high level of conflict. The goal is not to prevent conflict because it's not possible. If we think about conflict as anytime there's a disagreement, anytime somebody takes a different approach, anytime people have a different style, different ideas, different approaches, different styles, these are all good things and all things that are necessary for a team. However, oftentimes the conflict doesn't feel good. And so team leaders will often say, how can I reduce the amount of conflict on our team? Our goal is not to reduce the conflict. It's just not possible. But what the goal can be is to have productive conflicts. Now, productive conflict is different from what a lot of people see as that aggressive conflict. Amy, have you ever experienced aggressive conflict in your life?
Let's see, aggressive conflict. Yep, I would definitely think I have. An example isn't coming up. Well, honestly, so right now it's election day. And when I think about aggressive conflict, um, people talking about who they're going to vote for or why you should vote for one person, or we have a school referendum, whether you should vote for that or not. I feel like that qualifies as aggressive conflict in a lot of cases.
Absolutely. That idea of aggressive conflict where it's not necessarily moving anything forward. I love your election day example, right? It's like me versus you, and it can feel hostile, it can feel tense, it can just this is why, let me go this way. This is why conflict gets a bad rap, is because so quickly it can get into this place where it's just not feeling productive anymore. And so that's why when people think about aggressive conflict, oftentimes they think that the opposite then is just to not have any conflict at all, not to talk about it. Reality is the conflict is still there. It just takes a different form when you try to ignore it altogether, or not talk about it, or not have the conversations. And that's where it turns into that passive conflict. And so I know, I know in my family with election day right now, we've just agreed not to talk about it, right? Like it's just the way to not get into the debates. And maybe for election day, that's okay. But when we look at teams in the workplace, if you're constantly just saying, we're not going to talk about that, we're not going to talk about that, I'm not going to bring it up, I'm not going to go there. It's not that the conflict went away, the conflict's still there. And oftentimes, what passive conflict can look like is instead of talking to the person that you're actually having the conflict with, now you're having conversations with other people. It's triangulating. You're having the post meeting meetings, and it's getting, once again, not productive.
So I see that as sometimes if you have Zoom calls with your organization and then after the Zoom call, you hang up the Zoom call and you call your, your work buddy and say, "Oh my gosh, I wanted to say this, but I didn't." Or if you're in in-person meetings, maybe there's that walk to the car and then those parking lot conversations of like, "Oh my gosh, did you hear what she said? That was so wrong."
Yeah.
But again, but not saying it in the meeting.
Not saying it in the meeting, not going to the person that you need to talk to. Yeah, absolutely. And so we can look at this as a spectrum. And Amy, I love the examples that you gave there of passive conflict because we've probably all done that into some degree or not. And so it's not necessarily saying, oh, we can never vent or we can never gossip. The challenge is to recognize when you're on either end of that spectrum. So either if you're in that aggressive conflict, okay, I'm coming in hot to these arguments. I think which should be my way or the highway. I'm going to be really sort of stern, hostile. Again, it might be right on the kind of the cusp of aggressive, right? You don't need to be calling people names for it to be aggressive conflict. Also, on the other side of passive conflict, those examples that you just gave of, okay, we're doing some gossiping, we're having the phone call after the Zoom meeting, the parking lot conversation. The key is when you notice yourself on either ends of these spectrums or at the ends of the spectrum, how can you come back to that productive conflict? So if you're noticing you're having that parking lot conversation or somebody comes to you with that parking lot conversation, yeah, vent when you need to. But then can you get to that place of, okay, I'm here sort of venting about Jack. How can I have that conversation with Jack to bring it back to that productive? Or, okay, the emotions are high, we're getting ramped up, the debate that was maybe helpful 10 minutes ago has taken a turn and it's not helpful anymore. We're in this aggressive conflict. We're not working towards that resolution. How can we hit that pause button and think about what do we need to do to come back to productive conflict? In a recent Thoughtfully Fit gym workout, one of the people said, it sounds good in theory, but it sounds like it would be tough to actually do. And she was right. This is one of those things. It can be sort of simple to look at in theory, but doesn't make it easy to do in practice. But how it does get easier is if you practice and even just recognizing what side of this conflict spectrum am I in and how can I get back to productive conflict can make a huge difference. And so, if you are interested in learning more about how to deal with conflict, you can be one of the many people that call Amy. Amy, how can people get in touch with you?
We have a new website, darcyloma.com. Not new, but upgraded and improved. So I'm really excited for people to check that out. They can also email me at amy@darcyloma.com or find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, lots of different ways.
Yeah. And so if your team deals with conflict, welcome to the club. Every team does. And if you're ready to talk about it and move it into that productive place, give us a call. It's what we do and it's what we love working with in teams. Not dealing with the aggressive or the passive conflict, but getting to that place of productive conflict. Have a great day.